The forest held its breath, a tangible stillness that pressed down on the ancient gnarled trees, stifling even the whisper of the wind. Then, from the inky blackness beyond Elias's cabin, it ripped through the silence. A sound that was less a cry and more a raw, primal tearing of the night itself. It began as a low, guttural rumble, vibrating through the very soles of his feet, then swelled into a disembodied howl, impossibly loud, impossibly close. It wasn't the shriek of a cougar, nor the mournful baying of a wolf. This was something else entirely, a sound that resonated with the forgotten corners of the human psyche, stirring an instinctual dread. Elias froze, his hand hovering over the worn-out knob of his cabin door. His breath hitched, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He'd heard many strange things in his 2 decades living deep within the Olympic National Forest, but nothing quite like this. As the chilling echo dissipated, replaced by the persistent thrum of his own racing heart, another sound emerged, far more insidious. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Each weighty thud against the damp earth sent a fresh jolt of fear through him. They weren't the light, agile steps of a deer, nor the lumbering gait of a bear. These were footsteps that spoke of immense power, of a bipedal creature moving with an unwavering purpose, drawing closer with every menacing beat. Elias, a man woven into the fabric of these woods, had always sought the unseen. A reclusive cryptozoologist by trade, or perhaps more accurately, by obsession, he had dedicated his life to a singular, elusive truth: the existence of Bigfoot. His remote cabin, nestled deep in the Pacific Northwest, was not merely a home. It was a fortress of solitude, a launch pad for his relentless quest. Every creak of the timber, every rustle of the leaves, every distant call was filtered through the lens of his lifelong pursuit. He was driven by more than academic curiosity, a ghost of a memory, a fleeting childhood encounter he could barely recall, yet which had etched itself into his very being, propelled him forward. It was a fragment of an image, a colossal shadow against the twilight, a fleeting sense of immense benevolent presence that had both terrified and captivated him. He chased that feeling, that blurry imprint on his soul, with the fervor of a zealot. Lately, however, the forest had begun to whisper a different tune. A disconcerting undercurrent had settled over the usually predictable wilderness. Unsettling reports of unusual seismic activity had begun to filter through the sparse local news channels and hushed conversations at the general store. Subtle tremors, deep and resonant, that didn't quite register on official geological surveys, yet were felt by the animals. And the animals, the animals were acting strangely. Deer migrated in erratic patterns, birds abandoned their nests mid-season, and the usually vibrant nocturnal calls had dwindled to an unnerving silence, punctuated only by occasional, desperate cries. Worse still was the uptick in local disappearances. Hikers vanishing without a trace, hunters failing to return from their usual haunts, prospectors leaving behind their carefully guarded claims. Each instance was dismissed by authorities as unfortunate accidents, misjudged terrain, or the unpredictable whims of nature. But Elias knew the woods too well. He knew the difference between an accident and something else. He saw the pattern, felt the chilling coincidence, even if no one else dared to connect the dots. The forest, his sanctuary, was becoming a place of ominous disquiet, a landscape alive with an unseen growing tension. The howl, the footsteps, they were not isolated incidents. They were part of a larger, more sinister symphony. He gripped the door handle tighter, his knuckles white. The footsteps were now directly outside, incredibly close, shaking the very foundation of his small cabin. He could almost feel the vibrations through the wood. He knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that something profound and terrifying was unfolding. Something that transcended the simple search for a cryptid. The forest was no longer merely a stage for his research. It was becoming a player in a game far older and darker than he could have imagined. His quest for Bigfoot was about to take a turn into an abyss he hadn't known existed. Before we dive deeper into Elias's terrifying journey, take a moment to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on more unsettling tales. Every like, share, and comment helps us bring these disturbing revelations to light, challenging our understanding of what truly lurks beyond the veil of the ordinary. This story, unfolding in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, promises to redefine everything you thought you knew about the myths and legends of the wild, pushing the boundaries of cryptozoology into realms unimagined. The footsteps outside his cabin were not merely those of an elusive creature. They were the first tremors of a truth that would shake humanity to its core. A truth Elias was unknowingly destined to confront. Elias, fueled by a relentless curiosity and a lifetime spent chasing the elusive, initially saw the escalating disturbances as nothing less than a confirmation of his life's work. The strange seismic shudders that rippled through the earth, the unsettling quietude of the typically vibrant forest, and the sudden scarcity of common wildlife, all pointed to one thing in his mind: heightened Sasquatch activity. He theorized these apex cryptids were reacting to environmental shifts, perhaps even asserting new territories. And he felt an almost giddy anticipation. His late-night expeditions intensified, his old pickup truck kicking up dust on forgotten logging roads even deeper into the wilderness. He spent countless hours cloaked in the frigid night, his powerful binoculars sweeping across moonlit clearings, his directional microphone straining to catch the faintest rustle of an impossibly large creature. Yet, what he began to discover was far more confounding than he could have ever imagined. The first anomalies appeared subtly, almost as if designed to be overlooked. He started finding peculiar tracks, larger than any known animal, yes, but also possessing a strange, almost unnatural regularity, a uniformity of depth and stride that hinted at something other than brute force. They weren't just big, they were precise. Then came the fragments, small, metallic pieces glinting dully under his headlamp. Near his cabin, sometimes half buried in the damp soil, they weren't from a crashed plane, nor were they discarded farm equipment. These pieces had an inherent artistry, an almost organic curvature, yet felt impossibly hard and cold. Their surface, when he scraped away the dirt, revealed intricate micro-etchings too fine for the naked eye, patterns that seemed to shift and refract the light in unsettling ways. Every instinct he possessed screamed that these were not of this earth, at least not in any conventional sense. The true antagonist in Elias's unfolding drama wasn't a growling beast or a hostile individual, but an insidious, creeping dread. It began as a vague unease, a cold sensation at the base of his spine when he was alone in the vast quiet of his cabin. This unease steadily blossomed into a pervasive sense of being watched, an invisible pressure that pressed in from every side. The unexplainable phenomena escalated. His cabin's generator would sputter and die without warning, only to miraculously restart moments later. Strange, low-frequency hums vibrated the very foundations of his home, feeling less like natural earth sounds and more like deliberate sonic pulses. He tried to rationalize it, blaming faulty wiring or geological stress. But the patterns of occurrence were too complex, too intelligent seeming. Further exacerbating his isolation was the predictable wave of skepticism and outright ridicule he faced whenever he dared to cautiously share his findings. His online forum, once a haven for fringe theories and speculative cryptozoology, now treated his posts with thinly veiled contempt. Elias losing his marbles, one commenter quipped after he uploaded blurry photos of the metallic fragments. Looks like melted soda cans, Grandpa. Even local law enforcement, whom he'd contacted regarding the strange hums and minor disturbances, dismissed him with polite but firm suggestions to get more sleep, hinting at delusions brought on by solitude. They had bigger problems, they said, like the increasing number of missing persons cases in the surrounding areas. Cases they still couldn't explain, and for which Elias felt no rational human explanation would suffice. Their dismissiveness only served to steel his resolve, reminding him that true discovery rarely came from conventional channels. Driven by a desperate need for tangible evidence, Elias poured his remaining funds into state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. He meticulously installed high-resolution, infrared camera traps in strategic locations around his property and deep within the forest, hoping to capture the elusive giant responsible for the tracks. He deployed sensitive sound recorders, buried discreetly beneath camouflage, designed to pick up even the most subtle vibrational frequencies beyond the range of human hearing. Weeks turned into months as he reviewed thousands of hours of silent footage, his eyes aching, his spirit occasionally flagging, yet never fully succumbing to defeat. The metallic fragments became a new obsession. He meticulously cleaned them, examining them under a powerful magnifying glass, then a borrowed jeweler's loupe. Their composition defied explanation. They weren't iron, copper, or aluminum. They didn't respond to magnetic fields predictably. When he cautiously tried to heat one with a blowtorch, it simply resisted, remaining cool to the touch, only to emit a faint, iridescent glow before reverting to its inert state. He contacted a few sympathetic, if hesitant, material scientists he knew from his academic past, describing the fragments vaguely, without revealing their true origin. Their responses were uniform: impossible, unknown properties, unheard of alloy. One professor, intrigued despite himself, suggested he try a spectral analysis, a procedure far beyond Elias's meager resources. Yet Elias persevered, driven by a gnawing certainty that he was on the cusp of something monumental. He started sketching the intricate patterns on the fragments, realizing they weren't random, but repeated, symbolic, almost like a language. He found himself spending hours tracing the delicate lines, feeling an intuitive pull towards their meaning, a subconscious recognition of something ancient and profound. The forest, once a place of comfort and familiar mystery, now felt like a veil, subtly shifting, revealing glimpses of a reality far more complex and terrifying than he had ever dared to imagine. He knew he was no longer searching for an ape-like cryptid. He was stumbling upon a secret, woven into the very fabric of the earth, a secret that hummed beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The dread was a constant companion now, but it was overshadowed by an unquenchable thirst for answers, a primal need to understand what these strange tracks, these impossible fragments, and this pervasive, intelligent presence truly signified. His path was diverging radically from the pursuit of a mere zoological anomaly, leading him down a rabbit hole towards something far more significant and potentially dangerous. The subtle disturbances that Elias had initially dismissed as heightened Bigfoot activity began to transmute into something far more insidious, a palpable aggression directed squarely at him and his isolated sanctuary. One morning, he found his carefully placed trail cameras systematically dismantled, lenses scratched, and memory cards wiped clean, not by the clumsy force of an animal, but with an almost surgical precision. It was an unnerving message, a clear violation of his perceived safety. Inside his cabin, objects were subtly rearranged. His worn copy of the Sasquatch dossier was moved from his bedside table to a high shelf. A collection of unique geological samples scattered on the floor, and once, a meticulously organized map of the surrounding wilderness was found folded inside his coffee mug. These were not the random acts of nature. They spoke of a discerning, intelligent presence that sought to disorient and disturb him. The physical intrusions were unsettling enough, but the mental onslaught proved far more insidious. Elias began to experience vivid, unsettling nightmares that bled into his waking hours. They weren't typical frights or anxieties, but deeply resonant, almost archetypal visions. He saw towering, ancient forests shrouded in an unnatural mist, heard the mournful cries of unseen entities, and felt an overwhelming sense of loss, a sorrow that was too profound to be his own. These dreams felt less like productions of his subconscious, and more like echoes, shared memories forced upon his mind, fragments of a history he couldn't comprehend. The sheer emotional weight of these nocturnal visitations left him exhausted and increasingly paranoid. He found himself questioning every shadow, every creak of the cabin, convinced that the boundary between dream and reality was dissolving. One particularly eerie afternoon, driven by a nagging intuition, Elias ventured deeper into the woods than usual, following a faint, almost imperceptible scent of damp earth and something indefinable, metallic, yet organic. He stumbled upon an ancient, gnarled cedar tree, its bark a tapestry of time. There, etched deeply into the resilient wood, was not a claw mark or a territorial scrape, but something far more deliberate. It was a crude, yet undeniably intricate map. The lines weren't random. They formed a labyrinthine pattern, pointing with unmistakable clarity towards a specific, secluded section of the river that snaked through the valley below. The symbols interlaced within the map were unlike anything Elias had ever seen, a blend of geometric precision and organic flow, hinting at a language or a system of knowledge utterly alien to him. As he traced the grooves with his finger, a chill ran down his spine. This wasn't primitive art. It was a directive. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of both fear and exhilaration. Could this be it? Proof? A guide to something beyond his wildest theories? He spent hours meticulously sketching the map, trying to replicate its nuances, feeling an almost magnetic pull towards the river it indicated. Just as dusk began to paint the sky, in hues of deep violet and orange, Elias caught a fleeting glimpse of movement at the periphery of his vision. It was a shadow, tall and impossibly lean, darting between the dense trunks of ancient pines. It moved with a speed and fluidity that defied human capabilities, an ethereal blur that melted into the deepening twilight before he could fully register its form. He stood frozen, breath hitched in his throat, the hair on his arms prickling. It was humanoid, undeniably, but its motions were not of this world. Elias, desperate to share his unbelievable discoveries, reached out to the few individuals he still considered allies in the fractured online cryptozoology community. He posted his sketches of the tree map, described the metallic fragments in greater detail, and recounted the increasingly bizarre occurrences at his cabin. The response was a familiar chorus of skepticism, laced with thinly veiled ridicule. Sleep deprivation, Elias, one user commented. Stress can make you see things, another offered. The metallic fragments were dismissed as meteorite scraps or industrial refuse. The map as a natural tree fungus or an elaborate hoax. Even Dr. Eleanor Vance, a respected anthropologist he had corresponded with for years, suggested he might be experiencing cognitive overload from his isolation. Their disbelief was a physical blow, driving a wedge deeper between Elias and the outside world. He found himself retreating further, his cabin becoming less a sanctuary and more a self-imposed prison. The isolation, coupled with the relentless mental and physical disturbances, began to chip away at his once unwavering conviction. Was he truly on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history? Or was he slowly succumbing to a profound psychological breakdown? The line between objective reality and his own fractured perception blurred with each passing day. He started to doubt his memories, to question the authenticity of his own observations. The metallic fragments, once tangible proof, now seemed to shimmer with an almost illusory quality under his touch. The etched map on the tree, once a clear path to discovery, now felt like a taunt, a cruel trick played on his unraveling mind. The presence, whatever it was not just threatening his physical space. It was infiltrating his very sanity, turning his greatest passion into his deepest torment. He was alone, utterly and terrifyingly alone, grappling with a truth that no one else seemed prepared to believe or even conceive. The strange vocalization began subtly, a low, resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate not just in the air around Elias's cabin, but directly within his chest cavity. It wasn't a sound he could easily dismiss as wind or animal. It possessed an almost hypnotic quality, a deep, pervasive hum that pulsed with an intelligence he couldn't quite grasp, yet instinctively understood. It was a summons, clear and undeniable. He found himself drawn to the window, peering out into the moonless night. The forest, usually a symphony of rustling leaves and distant calls, was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Only that persistent, captivating hum filled the void. His eyes scanned the familiar landscape, a landscape that had become disturbingly unfamiliar over the past weeks. Then, stark against the damp earth near the edge of his property, illuminated faintly by the distant sliver of light from his cabin, he saw it. A footprint. Not just any footprint, but one of immense proportions, far larger and more defined than any he'd ever theorized Bigfoot might leave. Its impression was deep, indicating enormous weight, yet the ground around it seemed undisturbed, as if the creator of the print had descended and ascended with impossible lightness. The toes were distinct, primal, yet there was an unusual symmetry to the arch that hinted at something more than mere animalistic form. And critically, it pointed directly towards the river, a clear, unambiguous arrow laid out on the forest floor, mirroring the direction indicated by the strange map etched into the tree. The siren song hum intensified, reverberating through his bones, compelling him forward. All rational thought, all fear, all skepticism melted away, replaced by an overwhelming primal urge to follow. He grabbed his most powerful flashlight, its beam now seeming pathetically weak against the encroaching darkness, and started walking. Each step he took felt less like a conscious decision and more like an inevitable progression, as if an unseen force was guiding his feet. The air grew colder as he neared the riverbank, carrying with it the damp, earthy scent of water and decaying leaves. The hypnotic vocalization reached its crescendo, weaving itself into the very fabric of the night, a mesmerizing symphony urging him on. Finally, he stood at the edge of the rushing Blackwater, the river a dark, swirling ribbon. Under the oppressive canopy of trees, the hum subsided, replaced by the ceaseless murmur of the current. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom, dancing over the surface of the river, revealing nothing but the choppy waves. Disappointment, sharp and sudden, threatened to engulf him. Had it all been a delusion, a cruel trick of his own strained mind? Then, just beyond the reach of his flashlight's meager illumination, where the river deepened and widened, a dark, immovable shape materialized. It was massive, towering, a shadowy figure standing silent and still in the middle of the current, its form indistinct against the profound darkness of the opposite bank. Elias's heart stopped, then hammered anew with a ferocious intensity. This was not a bear, nor a moose, nor any known creature of these woods. This was something ancient, something profound. His breath hitched in his throat, a cold knot forming in his stomach as his eyes adjusted. Struggling to pierce the impenetrable darkness, two pinpricks of light ignited within the shadowy form. They were eyes, glowing intensely, not with the predatory glare of an animal, but with an ancient, knowing intelligence that seemed to pierce through Elias, seeing into the very core of his being. The light was an unearthly phosphorescence, a pale emerald green that pulsed with a deep, cosmic wisdom he could not comprehend. This was not the simple, hairy ape-man of cryptozoological lore. This was an entity, a presence, something far beyond the realm of flesh and blood he had ever conceived. The silence, save for the river's ceaseless rush, was deafening, amplifying the profound terror and awe that gripped him. He felt an overwhelming sense of insignificance, as if standing before a force of nature itself, a primeval consciousness that had witnessed the rise and fall of ages. As he stared, transfixed by the glowing eyes, a faint, almost imperceptible pulsation began to emanate from his backpack. He fumbled, tearing it open, and pulled out the metallic fragments he had obsessively guarded. In the ambient darkness, now subtly illuminated by the mysterious gaze across the water, the fragments were no longer inert. They pulsed with a faint, intrinsic luminescence, mirroring the green light in the figure's eyes. A soft, ethereal glow that shifted and intensified. As he watched, mesmerized, the fragments began to subtly change. Their rigid, geometric edges softened, blurring into more fluid lines. He saw patterns emerging within their structure, intricate designs that mirrored the strange symbols on the tree map he had sketched. They were not merely pieces of metal. They were dynamic, living components, responding to an unseen energy, an ancient frequency, now active in the oppressive stillness of the midnight river. A chilling realization dawned upon him. These were not merely fragments of some advanced technology, but a part of a much larger, interconnected system. A system now actively engaging with him, drawing him deeper into its unfathomable purpose. The reality he had meticulously constructed for himself was disintegrating, replaced by a truth far more complex, far more terrifying, and infinitely more profound than the existence of a mere cryptid. He was no longer a hunter of legends. He was a participant in one. The night air hung heavy with a damp, earthy scent as Elias stood, mesmerized by the river's edge. The faint glow from the metallic fragments in his hand pulsed, mirroring the strange, ancient intelligence he'd sensed from the colossal figure in the water. The river, usually a dark, murmuring presence, now felt alive, a conduit to something unfathomably old. A low hum, almost imperceptible at first, began to emanate from the depths. It was not the hum of machinery he knew, nor the deep thrum of the earth. It was something alien, resonant, vibrating deep within his chest. The water in front of him began to churn, not violently, but with a deliberate, slow momentum, as if a colossal, unseen hand was stirring it from below. A dark, irregularly shaped mass slowly broke the surface, glistening with river water under the pale moonlight. Elias's breath caught in his throat. It was enormous, easily 20 feet long and half as wide, its form vaguely rectangular, but with organic curves that defied simple geometry. The hum intensified, a low, guttural vibration that seemed to penetrate bone, silencing the nocturnal symphony of the forest. This was no natural phenomenon. It was too symmetrical, yet too organically fluid to be man-made. It felt ancient, imbued with a purpose that dwarfed human understanding. As it fully emerged, shedding the last vestiges of the river's clinging embrace, its true nature became horrifyingly clear. It wasn't a ship or a vessel designed for travel, at least not in any conventional sense. It was a sarcophagus, colossal and ornate, carved from a material that seemed to absorb and reflect moonlight simultaneously. The surface, though ancient, appeared untouched by time, its intricate carvings sharp and perfectly preserved. And then Elias saw them, symbols. They were everywhere, covering every inch of the sarcophagus's vast expanse, patterns interwoven with a precision that hinted at incredible technology and artistry. These were the exact symbols he had found etched into the tree near his cabin, the very same patterns that had begun to emerge on the metallic fragments in his pocket, now glowing with a faint internal light. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. This was what the map had led him to. This was the source of the fragments, the core of the mystery. The hum reached a crescendo, a resonating chord that filled the night. With a sound like grinding tectonic plates, a seam running the length of the sarcophagus began to glow, revealing hairline fractures that slowly, almost majestically, widened. The two halves of the massive container began to part, a process of incredible slowness and deliberate movement, revealing the interior not to the sky, but to Elias alone. Inside, bathed in a soft, ethereal blue light that pulsed from within the sarcophagus itself, were forms. Human forms. Hundreds of them, perfectly preserved, lying in neat, orderly rows within individual compartments. They were not skeletal remains, nor mummified husks. These were bodies in a state of suspended animation, their skin retaining a lifelike quality. Despite the apparent millennia they must have lain there, their faces, serene and unblemished, held expressions of profound peace, as if merely asleep. They wore garments that were archaic in style, flowing and elegant, yet made of materials that shimmered with an almost metallic sheen, hinting at a technology far beyond anything Elias had ever encountered. It was as if a slice of a forgotten civilization had been frozen in time, awaiting an awakening that now seemed imminent. Elias stumbled backward, the metallic fragments slipping from his numb fingers and falling with a soft clink onto the damp earth. His mind reeled, struggling to reconcile what his eyes were seeing with everything he had ever known. Bigfoot, the creature he had chased for years, the elusive cryptid, had led him not to another monster, but to humanity's own impossible past. The glowing eyes of the towering figure still stood sentinel in the deeper water, a silent, ancient guardian presiding over this impossible tableau. The creature hadn't been a monster, but a guide, a protector. What it guarded, however, was far more disturbing, far more profound than any beast. These slumbering figures, were not aliens, not intruders from another world. They were, unmistakably, human. But humans unlike any he had learned about in history books. Humans who possessed knowledge and technology that defied accepted timelines and scientific understanding. This was a direct, undeniable challenge to the very foundation of human civilization. The air grew heavy with the weight of this revelation. Each silent, dormant face inside the sarcophagus, a testament to a forgotten epoch. A secret so vast, it threatened to swallow Elias whole. The world, as he knew it, was a lie. And the truth, now laid bare before him, was both magnificent and terrifying. The realization struck Elias with the force of a physical blow, a truth so shattering, it rearranged the very fabric of his understanding. These were not just bodies, not mere relics of a bygone era. They were ancestors, preserved with an arcane precision that defied modern science, yet hinted at a technology far beyond anything humanity possessed today. The Bigfoot, that elusive, shadowy figure he had pursued his entire adult life, was not a wild cryptid, a primal beast roaming the wilderness. It was a guardian, a silent sentinel, perhaps even a caretaker of this ancient, hidden civilization. The hum emanating from the sarcophagus-like container intensified, a low thrum that vibrated not just in the air, but deep within his bones, resonating with a forgotten memory. As his trembling fingers traced the symbols adorning the vessel, a startling clarity began to emerge. The intricate carvings, once indecipherable, now seemed to whisper their meaning directly into his consciousness. He understood that these beings had not merely died. They had entered a state of deliberate suspended animation, a profound slumber chosen to escape a global catastrophe of their own making. They were a civilization on the brink, intelligent beyond measure, yet fatally flawed. They had pushed the boundaries of technology, of nature, of existence itself, until their world teetered on the precipice. Their decision to enter this stasis was an act of both desperation and profound hope, an intention to re-emerge when the world had healed, when the scars of their hubris had faded, and a new, more balanced era had dawned. His eyes scanned the perfectly preserved forms within the sarcophagus. They were human, undeniably so, yet their features carried an elegance, a refinement, that seemed to transcend the harshness of modern life. Their garments, though archaic in their cut and style, shimmered with an almost ethereal glow, woven from materials unknown to him, perhaps even capable of sustaining their wearers through millennia. A quiet dread settled over Elias, cold and heavy. This wasn't just a historical discovery. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest, most destructive tendencies. As these profound truths cascaded through Elias's mind, the Bigfoot entity revealed itself more fully. It stepped from the shadowy periphery of the riverbank, its massive form coalescing into a distinct, albeit still somewhat ethereal presence. Its eyes, those ancient, knowing orbs, locked with Elias's. There was no growl, no roar, no physical sound. Instead, a voice, calm and resonant, echoed directly in his mind, clear as if spoken aloud, yet entirely without sound. It was a voice that carried the weight of ages, of countless seasons and endless solitude. "You understand," the telepathic voice resonated. "Our purpose is revealed to one who truly seeks, not just to find, but to comprehend." The entity explained its role, a narrative woven into the very fabric of the forest, whispered by the winds through the ancient trees, carried by the currents of the river. It was a silent witness, a stoic protector tasked with safeguarding this profound secret, guarding the slumbering ancients until the designated time of their awakening. The Bigfoot, as Elias had always perceived it, was merely the most outward, physical manifestation of this ancient sentience, a form adopted to deter the curious and protect the sacred. Then came the true horror, the unspoken truth that sent shivers down Elias's spine. The entity conveyed, with an almost sorrowful resonance, the true reason for the ancient civilization's downfall. It wasn't a natural disaster, not an asteroid, not a plague. It was an insatiable hunger for progress, an unyielding drive for more, faster, bigger, without regard for the delicate balance of their world. They had mastered energies, manipulated genetics, reshaped landscapes, all in the name of advancement, until their planet groaned under the strain, until the very air they breathed turned toxic. The waters became barren. It was a self-inflicted wound, a slow, agonizing suicide, driven by unchecked ambition and a terrifying disregard for consequences. And as the entity's words echoed in his consciousness, Elias saw the terrifying parallels. The desperate scramble for resources, the relentless technological race, the widening chasm between humanity and the natural world. It all mirrored the path taken by these ancient sleepers. The Bigfoot was not merely recounting history. It was issuing a dire warning, a prophecy veiled in the past. This was humanity's darkest secret, not because it was evil, but because it revealed the inherent, destructive flaw within the human spirit, a flaw that continued to manifest in his own time. The discovery was not just about Bigfoot, it was about mankind, about the precipice upon which his own civilization now stood. He stood there, alone in the moonlit forest, grappling with a burden no single human was ever meant to bear. The cold river water lapped gently against the ancient sarcophagus, a lullaby to the dormant souls within, a stark counterpoint to the terrifying silence of the entity's revelation. The metallic fragments in his pocket pulsed faintly, as if echoing the heartbeat of a forgotten age, a silent testament to a truth too profound, too dangerous to be contained. The weight of the revelation pressed down on Elias, a crushing force that threatened to buckle his very bones. He stood at the precipice of an impossible choice, the fate of not just the ancient sleepers, but potentially modern humanity, resting precariously in his trembling hands. To reveal this discovery to the world, to tear open the sarcophagus of forgotten history, and parade its contents before a civilization unprepared for such a truth, felt like an act of profound irresponsibility. He envisioned the inevitable chaos, scientific dogma shattered, religious texts reinterpreted, societal structures crumbling under the sheer audacity of the revelation. Would it lead to enlightenment, a collective awakening to humanity's cyclical self-destruction? Or would it simply reawaken dormant conflicts, reignite the very pathologies that had driven the ancients to their suspended slumber? The entity, its presence still a silent, profound thrum in his mind, watched him, its ancient wisdom radiating a somber understanding of his predicament. The Bigfoot then projected visions into Elias's consciousness, not as concrete predictions, but as potent probabilities, chilling glimpses of what might unfold should he choose to unveil the secret. He saw headlines screaming of ancient civilizations, fierce debates erupting between those who would worship these beings as gods and those who would fear them as alien invaders. He witnessed the scramble for the sarcophagus, nations vying for control over the technology, the knowledge, and the dormant power contained within. He saw the sleeping figures, once pristine in their suspended animation, becoming subjects of invasive study, their archaic garments ripped apart for analysis, their very essence commodified. Most harrowing were the visions of the ancients awakening prematurely, disoriented and vulnerable, thrust into a world they would not recognize, a world still grappling with the very issues that had led to their original catastrophe. He saw their confusion turn to fear, their fear to anger, and then, inevitably, a clash of civilizations, ancient against modern, fueled by misunderstanding and the deep-seated human instinct for dominance. The telepathic message was stark. Humanity had not yet learned its lesson. The cycle of ambition, exploitation, and self-destruction remained unbroken. The visions faded, leaving Elias gasping for breath, the cold sweat clinging to his skin. The sheer magnitude of the responsibility was paralyzing. He was not merely a cryptozoologist seeking proof. He was a gatekeeper, an accidental custodian of humanity's most profound and dangerous secret. The entity offered no command, no direct instruction, only a final, resonant thought. The choice is yours, Elias. The future of both past and present hinges on your understanding of humanity's true nature. He looked again at the sarcophagus, its intricate carvings seeming to pulse with a hidden life under the pale moonlight. He looked at the river, flowing steadily, indifferent to the monumental decision being made on its banks. He looked inward, at the core of his own being, and saw the echo of the ancient's destructive ambition within his own species. He had spent his life seeking Bigfoot, driven by a childhood encounter he could barely recall, a nascent memory now understood to be the entity's gentle, early guidance. He had yearned for proof, for validation, for the glory of a groundbreaking discovery. But what glory was there in unleashing potential destruction? What validation in confirming humanity's inherent flaws? Slowly, deliberately, Elias moved towards the sarcophagus. His hands, still trembling, reached out to the ancient lid. The metallic fragments in his pocket, which had been vibrating with quiet energy, now seemed to quieten, as if holding their breath. He placed his palms flat against the cold, smooth surface, feeling the faint hum of dormant power emanating from within. The decision coalesced in his mind, born not of fear, but of a profound, heartbreaking understanding. He could not, in good conscience, unleash this truth upon a world so utterly unprepared. He could not risk reawakening the mistakes of the past, seeing them play out again in a new, perhaps even more devastating iteration. With a deep, shuddering breath, Elias pushed. The lid of the sarcophagus, which had risen with such eerie grace, now began its slow, grinding descent. The sound, more felt than heard, resonated through the river valley, a groan of ancient mechanisms returning to their silent vigil. As the last sliver of light disappeared from within, sealing the dormant figures once more into their timeless slumber, a heavy weight lifted from Elias's chest, replaced by an even heavier burden of responsibility. He had chosen. He had accepted his role not as a revealer of truth, but as its silent, solitary protector. The Bigfoot, the ancient entity, was no longer a myth he chased. It was a companion in guardianship, a silent witness to his most profound decision. The world would continue in its blissful ignorance, stumbling along its chosen path, unaware of the profound truth hidden just beneath the surface of the waters, protected by the vigilance of one man, forever changed by the weight of humanity's darkest secret. The river flowed on, a silent keeper of countless mysteries. This one now Elias's to hold, a secret he would carry to his grave, forever altering his perception of reality. The weight of the unburdened understanding pressed down on Elias, a crushing realization of the past echoing too loudly in the present. He stood transfixed in the moonlit clearing, the ancient sarcophagus a looming monument to humanity's cyclical folly. The Bigfoot entity, its form now a clearer, more defined silhouette against the shadowed trees, offered no further telepathic directives, only a silent, watchful presence. Elias knew, with an agonizing certainty that settled deep in his bones, what he had to do. The decision, though monumental, felt inevitable, a harrowing truth forced upon him by the sheer gravity of the situation. To unleash this secret, to reawaken these beings, would not be salvation but a catastrophic repetition, a potentially fatal acceleration of his own world's trajectory towards self-destruction. The burden of this knowledge was immense, a heavy mantle he never sought but now had to wear. With a deep, shuddering breath, Elias turned his gaze from the watchful guardian to the shimmering surface of the river. The sarcophagus, with its intricate alien carvings, seemed to hum softly in the pre-dawn chill. He reached out, his hand trembling, as he touched the cold, unyielding metal. He saw the symbols, now imbued with a terrifying new meaning. Not just ancient script, but a blueprint of historical self-sabotage. Slowly, carefully, Elias began the arduous task of resealing the sarcophagus. The mechanism, though seemingly complex, responded to a sequence of intricate pressures and subtle manipulations, as if designed to be operated with purpose, not force. The lid, which had opened with an ethereal grace, now descended with a soft final sigh, locking the dormant forms back into their timeless sleep. The soft, pulsating hum receded, replaced by the gentle lapping of the river against its banks, a natural rhythm attempting to reclaim the scene. The Bigfoot entity remained, a silent sentinel, until the last vestiges of the ancient vessel were once again submerged beneath the dark waters, disappearing as silently and mysteriously as it had emerged. Only the disturbed riverbed and the lingering scent of ozone marked its brief, profound presence. Elias felt a profound shift within him. The cryptozoologist obsessed with proof was gone, replaced by a guardian, a silent keeper of humanity's deepest, most dangerous truth. He left the riverbank as the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky, leaving behind the impossible scene. His steps back to the cabin were heavy, not with exhaustion, but with the immense weight of his secret. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, seemed to echo the unspoken pact he had made with the ancient guardian and with history itself. Once inside his cabin, the familiar surroundings felt alien, imbued with a new, somber significance. The maps, the meticulous notes, the grainy photographs of alleged sightings, all of it now seemed like childish scribbles, meaningless in the face of what he had witnessed. With a methodical, almost ritualistic solemnity, Elias began to destroy his life's work. The camera traps, the sound recorders, the research journals filled with decades of observations, all were systematically dismantled, burned, or buried. He kept only a handful of items: the metallic fragments, now cool and inert, and a single small notebook. In this notebook, he didn't record scientific data or cryptozoological theories. Instead, he penned cryptic observations, philosophical musings, and coded warnings disguised as ecological concerns. These were not for anyone else to decipher easily, but for himself, a constant reminder of the truth he protected, a personal testament to the monumental secret. Elias's days in the remote cabin continued, but his world had irrevocably changed. The restless energy that once fueled his expeditions was replaced by a quiet, profound introspection. He no longer sought Bigfoot as a cryptid, a creature to be captured and studied. He understood it now as a guardian, a timeless protector of an ancient, essential truth about humanity itself. The forest was no longer just a wilderness. It was a sanctuary, a living museum of forgotten histories and future warnings. He became a silent observer of the modern world, watching news reports of technological leaps, political strife, and environmental degradation with a knowing, heavy heart. He wondered if humanity would ever truly learn, if the cycle of unchecked ambition and eventual collapse was an unavoidable fate, or if there was still hope for a different path. He lived out his days in solitude, forever haunted by the immense weight of what he knew, a solitary sentinel of a secret too dangerous to be revealed. The forest became his confidant, the river his confessor. He never spoke of that night, never hinted at the profound shift in his understanding of existence. His eyes, once sharp with scientific curiosity, now held a deep, ancient sorrow, tempered by a quiet resolve. The story ends with an aged Elias, years later, standing by the riverbank as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. The gentle current flowed past, an eternal, indifferent witness to the passage of time and the secrets it held. In his weathered hand, glinting faintly in the dying light, was one of the metallic fragments, cool against his palm. It was a tangible link to that impossible night, a constant, silent reminder of the truth buried beneath the waters, a truth that had reshaped his life and his understanding of humanity's precarious dance on the edge of its own making. He gazed out at the darkening expanse of the river, a single, knowing tear tracing a path down his wrinkled cheek, a silent prayer for a future he might never see, a future where humanity finally chose wisdom over oblivion. If this unsettling journey into the unknown captivated you, make sure to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts on Elias's impossible choice, and subscribe for more stories that challenge our understanding of the world. And don't forget to click here for my next deep dive into the mysteries that lie hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be uncovered.